sort of.
So we're going to allow folks to enter. Hello.
No.
And then we're going to get started.
I don't know what to do with my hair. Okay. Matt, did you shave?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was Viola's idea.
I don't know. I like the beard, but I like it clean too.
I needed to have one of the bows though. I wanted to make sure I match her next time.
You should have had a bow. I should have had a bow.
Yeah.
Oh no. Yeah, we know. Are you listening to us? Don't be nosy.
Yes, we do know we are on. We are hanging out while we wait for folks to come on in, but it seems like some are here. If anyone would like to interact in the chat, you can turn your two on to everyone so that you can all interact with each other. So hello from Brooklyn. This is Kay from Greenlight. If you have any questions, you'll use the Q&A. Hi, Amy from Annette in the Q&A. Use the chat and I'll get us started. So good evening and welcome to tonight's live online author event with Greenlight Bookstore. I'm Kay from Greenlight Bookstore, and we are thrilled to host tonight's event with Amy Herrick launching her new book, The Tiltersmith. She will be talking with Matt Vitticore. Vitticore? Yeah, amazing. Great, so you're in for an excellent time. Before we start, I just want to say a huge thanks to Amy and to Matt and to our special guest star, Viola there, and the team at Algonquin Young Readers for making this happen, and to all of you for showing up. We're grateful for your support and for the chance to make space for conversation and connection. Now, just a couple of housekeeping things. In our Zoom webinar tonight, you can see and hear the speakers, but they can't see or hear you. They can see that you're here though, and there are a couple of different ways you can interact with the authors and with each other throughout tonight's event, which we highly encourage. The first is the chat, which you are all using now, and it's fantastic. You can find the chat by clicking on the icon that looks like one speech balloon. You're welcome to post your comments and thoughts in the chat. It's a great way to show your appreciation for the author and interact with fellow attendees. If you have a specific question you'd like to have answered by either of our panelists, please post that question in the Q&A module. You can find it by clicking on the icon that looks like two speech balloons. We'll be pulling questions only from the Q&A to be answered in the later part of the program. And importantly, tonight's featured book, The Tiltersmith, is available for sale from Greenlight Bookstore. You can shop in person. You can shop in person, there we go, from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. at both our Fulton Street and Flatbush Ave stores, where you can purchase Amy's book and many others on site. You can also order online at greenlightbookstore.com for quick pickup at the store or shipping anywhere in the US. I will drop the buy link in the chat. And look at that beautiful book. As thanks for attending tonight's virtual event, we are offering 10% off the featured book. Enter coupon code GreenlightEvents10 into the coupon discount section at checkout online for 10% off. Our interviewer tonight is Matt Viticore, who is all of the following and more: dad of two, husband to Superwoman, actor in Law & Order SVU, Holy Day, and more. Writer of Balladeer's Play to the Moon at Joe's Pub at the Public, songmaker and teacher. Matt is currently developing the music for a new play, Super Wolf, and thrilled to interview his friend and neighbor, Amy, about her new book alongside his daughter. Hello, give us a wave, Viola, our special guest tonight. Matt will be speaking with our featured author, Amy Herrick. Amy is the acclaimed author of the charming and clever transcendent middle grade debut, The Time Fetch, the precursor to tonight's featured book. She grew up in Queens, New York, and attended SUNY Binghamton and the University of Iowa. She lives in Brooklyn, where she has raised 2 sons, taught pre-K and grade school, written books, and kept company with her husband and numerous pets. A retired teacher, she loves traveling, learning Spanish, and above all, reducing her carbon footprint. In her new book, The Tiltersmith, Herrick returns to the world of The Time Fetch with a gripping standalone novel about climate change and the young people who are often the bravest advocates fighting against it. Following 4 quirky best friends, Edward, Feenix, Brigit, and Danton, Herrick's fantastical adventure combines science and folklore to spin a page-turning, action-packed story of friendship, love, teamwork, and environmental stewardship. Amy is going to start us off with a reading from the book, and then she'll be talking with Matt and with all of you. Without further ado, please take it away, Amy and Matt.
Thank you. First of all, I got to say thank you to Greenlight Bookstore for hosting this event and giving me the chance to launch my book and to celebrate with so many friends, neighbors, people I don't know yet. I very much appreciate it. And I was in there for the first time the other day, and it is a beautiful bookstore. They have two stores, and the one on Fulton Street, you got to visit it if you haven't seen it. I hadn't been there before. It's cozy and mysterious and full of books and little corners, and it's just the loveliest place. So go. And again, thank you, Greenlight Bookstore. And thanks, Matt and Viola, so much for being here. Viola is an unbelievable reader. She's in 3rd grade. She's read The Time Fetch, and she is the first reader of the Tiltersmith outside of the publishing people in my life, a real person reading the book. Her mother, I think, is the second one. And besides being a great reader and a great writer herself, she's a chess player moving competitively up the ladder very quickly. So I expect to see stories about chess playing from Viola soon. And Matt, thank you. It's so, your enthusiasm is so great. So I'm going to read a little bit from the book, but I need to set you up just a little bit first. And okay, so what I'll say is when the story opens, we're in Brooklyn, and on the calendar, it should be spring, but it is snowing, it's hailing, Prospect Park Lake is frozen solid, there's a cold north wind coming in, and winter just won't let go. Mr. Ross, the science teacher, thinks it's all due to climate change. But Feenix, now remember these names, Feenix, Brigit, Danton, and Edward, who were the protagonists in The Time Fetch and return here, have some reason to believe that there may be darker, older, magical forces at work. And their suspicions are confirmed when one day a mysterious stranger appears in their school, calling himself Superintendent Tiltersmith from the Central District Office. He's a dapper guy, well-dressed 3-piece suit, red vest, slightly crooked shoulders, and very small feet. And when he shows up, he begins to turn up in all sorts of odd places around the school in ways that are making the kids very nervous. They think, A, that he's watching them, and they believe he may be hunting for something. But what? So I'm going to read from the middle of the book, from a scene where he makes one of these appearances. And what you need to know very briefly about that is that the kids are in gym class. They've arrived in gym class, and for some reason their teacher isn't there yet. So they're just having a great time, and they're playing dodgeball and double Dutch jump rope. And then suddenly everybody stops, because standing in the doorway is the Tiltersmith. This chapter is from Brigit's point of view. Each chapter has a different point of view. It keeps going round and round. So you need to know that. So Brigit is watching what's going on. The Tiltersmith. Well, well, Am I interrupting something? Naturally, no one answered this. Where is your teacher, I wonder? Still no one spoke. Well, what fun. I certainly cannot leave you here unsupervised, can I? Why, what would the Central District Office have to say about something like that? But wait, I have an idea. Let us play a game together. He appeared delighted with the thought. All of you against me. If you win, you will be allowed to leave school for the rest of the day. Shouts of excitement went through the room. But, he interrupted, of course, if I win, you will stay right here. And he let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a giggle. To Brigit's relief, Danton spoke out. Well, tell us what the game is before we agree. The superintendent put his head to one side and examined Danton. You again. I noticed you keep turning up quite regularly, don't you? Well, how about a nice old-timey one that everybody knows? I call it Thunder, Rumble, Turn to Stone. We don't know that game, Danton said. Of course you do. In some places, they call it Grandmother's Footsteps. I think you might call it Red Light, Green Light. Come along, let's play. It will be a great treat for me. What do you have to lose? Before Danton could answer that question, the room erupted into shouting. Yeah, let's do it. I'm ready. Me too. Brigit saw that there was not going to be any stopping the Tiltersmith guy. And in just a few moments, all the kids were lined up against the far wall. Now, said the superintendent, I see you already know what to do. His voice bounced in a confusing way against the gymnasium floor and walls. My rules are probably a wee bit different than yours, so let me go over them. I will stand here at the front of the room. You will start over there at your home base. As soon as I turn and I cannot see you, you will all move toward me as quickly as you can. The idea is for one of you to tag me when my back is to you. However, I am free to turn around whenever I choose. I will give a warning by yelling, Thunder, Rumble, Grandma's here. But anyone I catch still moving will be turned to stone. And as stone, they must stay until someone still in the game manages to tag me. If I turn you all to stone before that happens, I win. However, if one of you does successfully tag me, I will chase that person back to home base. Should that person reach home base safely, the game goes to you. But he held up a warning finger here. If I catch that person, the game is mine. What say you? There were murmurs of excited agreement. There's something I don't like about this, Feenix whispered. Danton nodded. Be careful. Are you ready? The superintendent asked, and then he turned his back on them. Most people ran forward quickly, including Feenix. Danton, however, took one big step and stopped, and then he took another and stopped. He covered an amazing amount of ground this way because of the length of his legs, but he could also break quickly. It was a good strategy, Brigit thought. She tried to stay right behind him, but he had gotten quite a bit ahead of her when the Tiltersmith yelled, Thunder, Rumble, Grandma's here, and whipped around. Everybody froze. The superintendent had pulled his blue pen from his pocket. I saw you, and you, he called, pointing the pen at Rohan, Beatrice, and a couple of other kids. He clicked his tongue each time he pointed. You are now stone. Beatrice was caught with one arm flung dramatically up in the air. Superintendent Tiltersmith turned his back again. In this round, he allowed a little more time to elapse without turning around. As Brigit passed Beatrice, she accidentally bumped her elbow. The elbow didn't move. It felt hard and cold as stone. Brigit glanced at Beatrice's face and saw that her mouth was wide open and her eyes were fixed in a stare of panic. Thunder, rumble, Grandma's here. On this try, the Tiltersmith caught 5 more people, but Brigit saw that none of them were part of their foursome. Danton was in the lead. The third time the Tiltersmith turned, it seemed he couldn't find anyone to point to. He knit his brow and made a thinking face. Well, let's see if we can speed this up a bit. He stepped forward into the crowd of kids facing him. No moving, he warned. From off to the side, Feenix yelled, "Hey, you're not allowed to leave your spot like that. It's not in the rules." The Tiltersmith whipped around to see who had spoken, but Feenix had shut her mouth tight and wasn't moving. "Oh yes, sorry," he said. "I forgot to mention. In this version, Grandma is permitted to walk amongst you. You may move if you think I won't see you, but of course, if I catch you, well." He tick-tocked his pen back and forth in warning. Now he walked over to Jorge, who had not yet been caught. The Tiltersmith leaned forward and stared right into Jorge's eyes. "No blinking," the Tiltersmith said. "Blinking counts." Brigit was positioned where she could see the whole thing, a staring contest. She sent Jorge encouraging thoughts. "You can do it, you can do it." But he couldn't, at least not for long. "Out," the superintendent called gleefully. Jorge took an angry breath and then he froze, his face and his body growing stiff and still. The superintendent turned again and searched for another victim. He came up behind Tessa and poked his finger in her armpit and began to tickle her, smiling as he did. Tessa made a valiant effort to stay still, but in a few seconds yanked herself away from his hand, half laughing, half pleading. She cried, "Please don't." He pointed at her. "Out," he called. Tessa stopped pleading in mid-sentence. "Oh, this is more fun than I remembered," the Tiltersmith crowed. He swiveled on his little sneakers and grabbed hold of Asim's nose and pinched it. "Ow," Asim yelled. And then he too fell abruptly still as stone. The superintendent turned again slowly, searching for a victim. Brigit quickly looked away. She certainly did not want to meet his eyes. A peppery taste of fear came up in the back of her throat. She knew suddenly that he was actually looking for her, that he had been looking for her all along. And I will stop there.
Wow, wow, wow. That was amazing. Everybody just go buy the book. Let's go.
Okay. Yeah. I just want to say, I have like half that book takes place in the school, but a lot of it takes place in Prospect Park. This was a school scene, but there's a lot of Prospect Park scenes too. So that's just a taste of some aspect of the book. Okay, I'm sorry, Matt. Go forth. Speak. Questions.
Thank you for reading that section. I had no idea what you were going to read aloud. Viola has finished the book, and I've gotten up right to the end of that chapter. So I read that part and was riveted by that. And so was Viola. So as you were reading it, we're both like, ugh. One of the things I just want to mention before I ask some questions is how cinematic that scene is. And it makes me wonder, I didn't write this question down for you, but I wonder if this could be adapted into a film. I think that's a very cinematic, very intense scene. I love it. I love hearing it out loud.
Well, that's interesting. I don't think about that when I'm writing, but that's good to hear. Good.
Yeah.
Oh.
All right, so we've got some questions for you. And, we're huge fans because during the pandemic, we drove out of the city and Viola and I read aloud The Time Fetch. And it was such a bonding experience. And we really, really loved it. So when we found out you had a companion book started and was developing and writing, and now that you've published it, we are over the moon. Just wanted to make sure I said that. So the first question, you're welcome. The first question for you, Miss Amy, is why is it important for you to tell stories like The Tiltersmith?
Okay. Now, full disclosure, Matt offered me the opportunity to see the questions, that some of them that he had ahead of time. And I thought about it and I thought, yeah, otherwise, what if I freeze up and I make a complete fool of myself? So I have had a chance to think about some of these, and I have some little notes here that I'll look at, but it's a good question. It's a great question. But let me say, first of all, this, I don't think that when I'm starting to write something, I ever think, what can I write that's important? And that's not to be dismissive of people who do write in mind with a topic that's important, that, you know, they're trying to show us something about the suffering of other people, or about history, or about science, or some pain that they've been through. There's so many important topics to write about, and you start thinking about that in the beginning. I don't usually start that way. I usually start more with some little scrap or bit of something. Often it's a story that some friend has told me about their family. I have a lot of storytelling friends. You know who you are. I saw your names out there. And that will start me on something. Or I observe something that's interesting to me, and I think, I got to have that. I got to take that and I got to make it into something, shape it and turn it into something that's meaningful to me or to the person who told me the story. And that gets me going. And in the process of doing that, a book or a story may emerge. And usually as I'm writing a book, I'm going along and I realize, I'm writing about something that really preoccupies me, and I hadn't quite realized it. In the case of the time fetch, I was writing about time and some of my feelings and discoveries about time, about how a little minute can be very short and a little minute can be very long, and how sometimes we feel that there's not enough time in a day, and sometimes we feel like a day has lasted a lifetime. And I love science fiction, so I love to think about time and all the conundrums that go along with it. It happens that for this book, The Tiltersmith, there was a little scrap that started me going. And I'll just tell you just a little bit about that. I wrote about it in my blog. So I'm not going to tell you all of it, you can go and read about it. But when I was walking with my dog, Autumn, a number of years ago in Prospect Park, where we walked all the time, we were way up on Outlook Hill, which is one of the highest points in Brooklyn. And the path runs through the woods, so that on one side, there's a big hill going up higher, and on the other side the hill runs down, and in the winter you can see the lake and you can see all the way out across Brooklyn. And we were alone. We hadn't seen anybody for quite a while, and we're going along, and suddenly Autumn stops. Something has caught her attention, and she looks over up the hill. She looks a little bit unsure, maybe a little alarmed, and I follow her gaze, and I see that there's another dog up there. Big Mastiff dog. Does not look angry or threatening. He's sort of sitting in the leaves. He looks a little bit sad, and he's watching us very carefully. And I went, uh-oh, a lost dog. You know, and I'm looking around, and I haven't seen anybody. I don't see anybody else. So I'm worried about it. And eventually I call out to the dog and I say, hey, sweetie, you're lost? The dog doesn't respond. And I take a little step upwards, and I'm starting to think, if I have to catch her, and it's a him actually, what will I do? But as I stepped into the leaves, the dog turned around and just sort of loped off into the woods. Disappeared. A little later, I ran into somebody else who was walking the dog, and I said, have you seen anybody looking for a lost dog? Because I saw this dog and I'm worried. And when I described the dog to this person, he said, oh, that sounds like the ghost dog. And I said, what's the ghost dog? And he said, well, he's been around for some time living in the park. And people refer to him either as the ghost dog or the cemetery dog, and nobody really knows where he came from. And after that, I would run into this dog from time to time. I'd keep my eyes open for him. And it became very much on my mind, and I was very worried about him. But he became the beginning of the Tiltersmith. And if you want to see how that evolved, you can read my blog, not very long, on my website, Amy Herrick author.com. So you can do it. So that's where that started. And it's just an example of often how I work. So importance, yes, but not in the beginning. And we can come back to the question of importance. Go ahead, Matt, ask me another question.
Well, I was just going to say that it's so amazing how, with you reading aloud your text and then telling a story about the ghost dog, everything is compelling. You're such a storyteller. And so all of us in your life that know you, and everyone that doesn't, who gets to read your work or is here now, it's such a gift. It's such a gift for us to be here. You know, Viola's face when you were talking about the ghost talk, she was like, whoa, you know, and so it's just wonderful listening to you tell stories.
Thank you.
What is your process for creating rich characters?
Well, when I read this question, I thought, you know, it's kind of like auditioning an actor for a play that hasn't been written yet. I mean, very often when I start something, I don't know who the characters are going to be. I might know in the beginning one or two of the characters. And as you go, the character starts to create part of the story, and the story starts to create more characters, and the whole thing sort of opens up like that. But in the beginning, I will kind of send out a notice and say, okay, I'm auditioning, you know, because if I know I have a character who's of a certain type, I want to think, well, where do I know anything or anybody about it to create that type? And I usually begin with myself. I go down and interview various people inside of here because, you know, we're all made up of many different people. Depends a lot on the weather, the time of day, how old we are, but we've been many things and are many things. And I got a lot of people in there to call on. In the case of Brigit, who I first developed in the time fetch, I was looking for someone who was very shy. And I was very shy as a kid and a real bookworm. And I drew on that for her. And then interestingly, though, in the case of Edward, who's really a kind of very space cadet-y, nerdy, interested in science guy, I was like that too. So I think I drew a lot of Edward out of there, as well as from members of my family. Feenix when Feenix appeared, and she wasn't there initially, there was a wild girl who lived down at the end of the block, a young middle grader, early high school. And I used to watch her on the street, and she was all over the place, and she had this wild hair, and she was having a great time, and she was always in trouble. And I used her to start to create Feenix. And Danton was more complicated, so I won't even go there. But after using myself, if I'm trying then to find more pieces, I'm looking at other people around me, people in my family, people in my neighborhood, people I know, and from them I can find clues for creating a character. Now, in the case of the Tiltersmith, I already had those 4 characters blocked out, but the 3 new characters in the Tiltersmith are all kind of mythological. A couple of them are nature spirits, and one, I'm not sure what he is. But for them, I think I'd use much more books, reading and stories that I knew, and from old stories and folklore, I drew on them to create these characters and put them together and make something that fit into this story. So characters come from a lot of different places. So now I'm going to turn this around. Viola, get ready. Viola, you there? If you were to write a story, what kind of characters or character do you like to write about, and where do you find them?
Well, I've actually started to write a story right now. And my first character is, she's kind of shy, but then at the same time, she kind of doubts herself a bit.
And how do you figure out who she is? Does she remind you of yourself or anybody else? How do you figure out how to describe her or move her around?
Guess I just do it as I go.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll be interested to see this shy character. And Matt, playwright and actor, and I think that developing characters for a playwright is very different than developing characters. Well, maybe it isn't. I don't know. For an actor, is it?
I think the audition idea is pretty amazing because it's similar. I think that you're auditioning in some ways, you know, as an actor, you're auditioning all the time, but as a writer, you're doing the same thing. You're really looking for how do these characters speak to you, and then letting them speak. and seeing where they go is a fascinating thing. So my short answer for it is letting characters surprise you. And when you think you know who they are, you put them in a very challenging situation, a situation that might not be one that you planned, and see how they respond, and it might surprise you. And that's part of the fun of storytelling.
All right. All right, let's go to another one.
Got another one for you. How does Brooklyn itself as a central element figure into your process?
It's impossible to leave Brooklyn out of my process because I've lived here now. I grew up in Queens, but moved here after finishing graduate school and been here for 45 years. And although we've traveled a bit, we haven't traveled a lot, and we don't have another house anywhere. So this is the place where I get so much of my material. I'm not a world builder. That's interesting because that comes back later. I mean, I really use worlds that I know, and this is the world that I know. And I love Brooklyn in all of its busyness and its wonderful mix of people from all over, and its many different kinds of neighborhoods architecturally, and all the activity on the streets. And right in the middle of it, near us, is Prospect Park. So around Prospect Park, all on the sides are buildings and streets. And there's all of this stuff going on. And you walk through the gate in the morning with your dog into Prospect Park, and everything falls quiet except for the birds. And it's a whole different world of rolling hills and streams and bridges. And it speaks to me and to everybody in Brooklyn. I mean, to so many people in Brooklyn so loudly. If you come again on a Saturday afternoon in summer, it's a completely different place, full of people picnicking and rollerblading and biking and running and playing in the playground. And the sort of odd wonderfulness of this beautiful wilderness, because there's real wilderness in Prospect Park, right side by side with all of these people moving through it and enjoying it and needing it, is this constant reminder to me of the importance of having these green spaces. And then a constant reminder of what we're facing right now. What happens if we lose this? I mean, Prospect Park has made it work. And Prospect Park Alliance is really terrific at keeping this place going and functioning and clean and beautiful. But it's another problem when it's the whole world and it's full of people. But I'm thinking about this all the time when I'm in there. So it plays a very large part. It has in the last 2 books. I've been living with it for the last 15 years. I'm every day thinking about it. So that's what I have to say about Brooklyn and Prospect Park. I don't know, have you used Brooklyn at all in your writing, Matt? Or you do some world?
I suppose not, actually. I really haven't yet. I've used the stage. I suppose I've written about the stage, but not Brooklyn itself. So, but that was one of the things we loved about the time fetch, was we were out of the city for a little while, and here we are in Prospect Park. We're in Brooklyn, in our neighborhood, as we were reading through that book. And same thing with the Tiltersmith. So that was a big charm for us, and it made us feel homesick in some ways, and also anchored and tethered to Brooklyn again. So I think it's like another character in your books.
I think so too. Viola, have you used Prospect Park at all in your writings or your drawings or any of your artwork?
Well, in the story that I'm writing, I'm going to add Prospect Park, but not yet.
All right, good. All right. Okay.
All right. What brings you the most joy as an author as you're writing a book?
Oh, I love this question. It's a door to a lot of other issues, but well, when I'm working and I get stuck, which happens all the time, and I'm struggling and I'm thinking, okay, what's got to happen next? Or what should Feenix say to Ed? Should she insult him or not? What should happen there? What image do I need to evoke in the reader a sense of surprise here, or suspensefulness, or of revelation? And I can't find the answer. And I also, I often thinking about, by the way, about a chess game when I get there, is that here I am on the board in this place. There are so many possibilities of where you could go. Should I move the pawn? Should I move the queen? Should I take the bishop? And if I do, what will happen next? And how do I know? And it's a million different permutations. I can't do this anymore. And I just, that's it. And that can go on for days. It can go on for weeks where I'm really stuck on something. And very frustrating, and often think about giving up at that point. And then I'll just get up, I'll get something to eat. I'll get a cup of tea. I'll get up, I'll notice if the cat bowl needs more water in it, I'll put more water in it, and then I'll be standing in front of the cabinet and I'll be looking, where is the peanut butter? Where did I put the peanut butter? And then suddenly I freeze because there it is. It's as if somebody has spoken in my ear the answer to what it is that needs to happen next. And I mean, it absolutely feels like, magic in the broadest sense of the word. And I know that you can talk about this in a way that makes, scientific, neurological sense. Well, you've been working and you've got all of this stuff going on in here in the front of your consciousness, and you're asking all these questions, and you relaxed for a moment, and then the answer has been going on back here, then in a way that you're not completely in touch with, and so it comes forward and they meet. And yeah, that's true. But it's also, I know it's not true. I know that there's I feel that we're so connected to everything around us, and we don't think about that often, but that there's so many other forces and currents that are going all around. I was thinking about this the other day in terms of watching the pigeons outside my window. And I was watching this one pigeon that was like flapping along and really working at it. And all of a sudden, it just opened its wings and it started to just shh. Now, obviously it had caught some current of air that I can't see. Pigeon doesn't see it, but must sense it certainly in some way that we can't. But all of that effort was then gone because the pigeon had met up with this current, with this force. And I think that this happens to us as human beings in all kinds of parts of our life, that you're putting in work and effort, and then you run into something that's going on out there. And it could be, something from other people around you, or it could be the taste of the peanut butter. I mean, something else that affects your internalness, or that gives you some information that you need, or something just semi-divine. Who the hell knows what it is? There it is, it comes in. And those things are there all the time. And how you get to them, you don't have control over getting to it. You wish you had control over that. And I think it helps if you've put in effort, but it can also happen when you haven't put in any effort. It just comes to you. I mean, you hear about scientists making great breakthroughs, and then they've put in effort, so that doesn't really count. But that experience, I think, is the most exciting, satisfying part of writing for me. It's one of them.
All right, I've got a few more questions for you, and then one from Viola. We're going to jump into the questions that are coming in for the Q&A. How's that sound? Good.
You want to go to the Q&A now, or are we that far along?
Well,
no,
let's
do one more of your questions. Okay.
One more, and then we'll do a Viola question, then jump to Q&A. How's that? Sound good?
Okay. Can I choose the question?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, let's go to the very last question, which was, what matters the most when you're telling stories? I think that my favorite odd thing that human beings do that makes them human is that they tell stories. And it's upon stories that all of civilization has been built. In the beginning, people were telling stories to explain what's going to happen next, to explain why does the sun come up in the morning, and why does the sun go down, and why do the seasons go round, and why do the leaves come back. And people told stories about this. And they had all these wonderful gods and interesting ways of explaining it. And as time went on, and they're looking more closely, and they're beginning to come they're making regular observations and counting, and they're beginning to have new technology to look at things more closely. Slowly the factual, they come closer to more factual answers to what's happening here. And science sort of comes out of this. And science builds itself on these stories, and then science builds itself on itself. And our sense of ourself as a culture and as civilization is growing and growing with the storytelling. So storytelling is in everything. The irony, of course, with science is that once science comes along and has all these facts, it just opens up more mysteries. And then you've got to have the storytelling there, because you've got to keep talking about the mysteries and what's going on and trying to figure out, well, okay, but we don't know where the world came from in the first place. What kind of story can we tell about that? We don't know if there's other universes. What kind of stories can we tell about that? And it continues to let us explore things that we don't understand yet. Invisible things, monsters under the bed, the terrible things that are facing us, like climate change. Stories stop you in your tracks, so you can look at things in a way that you've never looked at them before and see them in a new light. They let you look into other people's hearts, and we begin to understand psychology and how we're not all the same, and we're all different, and there's all different ways of resolving problems, and how important it is for us to see that and to be sympathetic to each other. And stories help us to be inventive and brave and hopeful, and we really have always needed them, and we really need them now. And I feel, since this is my thing and I've been doing it forever, that it's a good thing to do. And I'm always hoping that I'm going to find a story that's got something well enough told in it that it becomes important to somebody else, and they take that inside themselves and make meaning, and then go on and tell whatever stories they have to tell, in whatever form they have to tell it. So that's what I wanted to say about storytelling. Okay.
I love that. I've got a question for Viola at the end here. Want to read it, Viola? Go ahead.
Yeah. Was there anyone in your life who inspired you to keep going when things got difficult?
Anyone in my life who inspired me? Oh, yeah. I mean, I have come, as I get older, to feel that there is nothing more important than friendship, and that this is what we are meant to do for each other. I mean, there was my mother in the beginning, but I'm so lucky that I have numerous wonderful friends who, when I am blue or in despair or not feeling well, will be there, will chase me down and ask me how I'm doing and help me out and give me their stories so I can use their stories in my work. So there have been, it's hard for me to answer just one there, but this is more, I'm thinking about the importance of friendship. And that also plays a part in my writing, that I really think it's a fun thing to write about.
Great. Okay, what do you say we jump into the Q&A? Is it a good time? What do you think? Let's see.
Okay. Are there any Q&As out there?
There is. We've got a bunch of questions in here.
Okay.
And so there's a couple of really good ones. I want to start with...
Don't give me anything too hard. I'll freeze up.
Okay, this one comes from Charlie Himmelstein.
No,
that guy.
You want to read that? Go ahead.
My son.
I really think this should make a great movie. Do you have a dream director that you think would do a great job converting your book to film?
A dream director. Oh God, I don't really think in terms of directors too much, Charlie. I don't know. What do you think, Charles? You got a dream? No, you haven't read the book, so you don't know yet. You got an idea, Matt? Who can we get to direct my book?
Oh, let's see.
Coen brothers.
Sure, Wes Anderson, Jane.
Yeah,
Campion.
Wes Anderson. Maybe Wes Anderson. Yeah.
Let's get Jane Campion.
Oh yeah. Okay. She gets pretty brutal though.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Well,
thanks, Charles.
Let's see. We've got a question from Sophia DeBoer.
Mm-hmm. Good friend.
Where does the name Tiltersmith come from, and what does it mean?
That's a bit of a spoiler. Don't you think? What do you think, Viola? If I tell that, I think I'm giving something away about what his motive, what his mission is. But it does have to, I'll say this, it does have to do with the tilt of the earth and climate change. Those things. Okay, that's all you
good.
get.
That doesn't spoil too much. I like that. Doesn't
Okay.
spoil too much. I like that. All right, let's see. Here's another question. Okay, this is from Sam. Want to read it? Okay.
So your first two novels were adult fiction, A Sign of the Naked Waiter, and The Happiness Code. Since you have written a children's book and 2 young adult novels, do you think you will ever go back to writing adult novels? Why did you decide to shift to writing young adult books?
Okay, that's a great question, Sam. Let me just take the second part of that. I'm not sure where I'm going to go in the future, but I think that reading when you're young, when you're first beginning to be a serious reader, and you can do it on your own, and into your later middle grade and into high school, is the most exciting time to be a reader. You're hearing me, Viola? It's because you're so, people at that developmental stage are so open and so excited without being critical about what they're reading in general. I mean, they might say, I don't like this is boring. But when they find something they love, they're so completely enchanted and taken by it. And it stays with you for the rest of your life. And it influences you as you're becoming a reader who is beginning to look at things critically. I think reading critically allows you to see things in a greater spectrum of richness, but the visceral sensation of reading at that age is so joyful when it goes right. And I always thought I would love to write a book that gave me the same feelings that A Wrinkle in Time gave me, or The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or one of Susan Cooper's books. That first time of reading those was so delicious to me, especially if I had a chocolate bar and it was summer and I was sitting under a tree, that I wanted to try to do that. And I've been fortunate that the greatest happiness that I had, going back to one of your questions, was the other night when I saw Viola lying on my couch reading the Tiltersmith and not listening to us. And I thought how wonderful. And I got a great Facebook message the other day from a mom in Brooklyn who said she and her son had happened to pick up a copy of the Time Fetch off of a stoop about a month ago, and they read it and they really enjoyed it. And now they were so excited because there was another one coming. And it was so nice of them to write me this message. But I felt like that is all. I mean, it's not all. Would I like to sell a squillion books? Yeah, but that's not the point. The point is to make that connection and to have a reader who really has had some feeling of connection and revelation from what I've done in the way that I experienced it. It's so delightful to me. It's a greatest happiness.
That's amazing, Amy. Thank you for that answer. Thank you for all the questions that are coming in, everybody. We have another question from Elena.
What inspired you to choose climate change as one of the themes for this book? Was it inclusion to the story intentional, or did it come up organically?
Yeah.
Right.
Organically. Thank you, Elena. It's a great question, because as I was saying in the beginning, I often start with scraps of things and start pulling them together. And I knew that I wanted to write a book that had a seasonal, sort of pantheistic, nature gods feeling to it. But I was not thinking about climate change. And then as I was writing it, I realized there was no way to avoid writing about climate change, as I was telling this kind of mythological story about spring being held captive. And it evolved organically into the book as I went along. And it really changed the nature of my drafts. I had to go back and start all over again. And I was kind of surprised at myself because I've never written that topically before, but it's right there. We got to think about it, and it is really part of this story. Yeah.
All right, we have so many good questions in here, everybody. Can we do this again? And can everyone come back?
Okay, tomorrow night.
We have a question from Kara Kantrovitz. Go ahead, Viola, you want to read it right here?
Okay.
I have a question. I was wondering, what advice do you have for rising authors?
Oh, no, that was going to be one of Matt's questions too, I think. That's a good question too. And I have taught writing on and off over the years, so not recently. Well, I mean, if you want to just write, first of all, and you're not yet thinking, oh, I want to get published and I want to, you just want to write, keep a journal and write as much as you can, observe, keep walking around and looking, ask people for their stories, because you will be amazed at the stories that people will throw at you. If you say, hey, did anything interesting happen to you last weekend? You'll get all kinds of stuff. And just keep on doing it. And you can share it with whoever you think would enjoy it and see what kind of responses you get. If you get to the point where you're starting to think seriously that you want to be a writer, then there's some other very serious questions to think about, because being an artist of any kind is always a very difficult challenge. And you got to be aware of that as you're going into this. So if you start getting ready to send things out, with as light a heart as possible, you have to prepare yourself for rejection and for criticism, and try to use those things in a way that's useful for you, and be aware that not everybody's going to like what you do, that we all like different things, and there's a wide spectrum of how people are going to respond to you. And if you really think you want to be a writer, you've got to think, okay, how am I going to support myself so I have enough time to do that, as well as find myself work to do, paying work to do that will keep me nourished and not exhausted. And if you get lucky, you'll be able to live off your writing. But that doesn't happen for many people. Many people end up teaching or working in publishing, but you have to decide, is that going to work for you? Will that give you what you need? So Matt, you teach this. You got any fast answers to that question about advice to people who want to write?
Oh, my advice is to always write and never stop, come what may. That's always my advice. So even when it's impossible, write and create anyway. That's always my advice to my students, to my fellow, or my artists, my friends, my children, everybody. Just write no matter what. That's my advice.
Okay, that's my advice too. Journal too is really fun.
Yeah. All right. So we have time for some more questions. Let's see. There's one here we'd like to answer from Oscar. Go ahead.
Do you find yourself with a whole new take, or do you develop the new idea later or in a future job?
The second part is, do you develop the new idea later on in a future job?
If you take let me see if I'm understanding this. If you take another job, will you develop writing ideas? Do you think that's what the question is?
Let me see. Do you find yourself with a whole new take, or do you develop the new idea later on in a future job?
How would you interpret that?
I'm not sure. No, I'm not sure if I'm interpreting it right. Let's go to a different question.
I think there's another part to Oscar's question. So I want to make sure that both of you have the context.
Okay, hi,
so
Kay.
It looks like it got split up. Hi.
Oh, there
Oscar
it is.
says, yeah, do you want to read it, Viola?
Yeah. When writing a book, do you ever change midway through?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I often have this experience when I'm writing that it's like one of those mazes in a children's, puzzle book where you start out and you're going and you hit the wall, bang. Oh, okay, got to back up, got to go the other way. And then up another wall, and then you got to go the other way. It's a labyrinth, it's a maze. And the Minotaur is either at the back or in front of you and is chasing you, and you've got to finish the book. And so you change your mind about the direction that you're going in, and a new character entirely may come up. And in fact, in the Tiltersmith, I used the dog that I was talking to the ghost dog initially, and he ended up morphing into something else as I went along. But I was about halfway through writing the book when that happened. Yeah, that's hard because it's hard to let go of what you've done. And sometimes you have to be ready to do that. And then you feel, okay, that's right. I got to let go and go move this way. Great question.
That's a great question. I'm sorry I missed that first part there. Okay, so this is a longer question from Amelia Del Grosso.
My niece.
As a listener, I cannot help but interpret your choices as a reference to environmental racism, which disproportionately impacts historically marginalized communities. Was your selection of an urban location with a diverse array of characters intentional?
Read the first part again. I'm not sure I'm understanding.
As a listener, I cannot help but interpret your choices as a reference to environmental racism, which disproportionately impacts historically marginalized communities. Was your selection of an urban location with a diverse array of characters intentional?
Yeah, and I don't think in that way. I think the diverse array of characters was somewhat intentional, but although that just sort of evolved as I went along, that I wanted, to show my awareness of the diversity of our world, and wanted to show how friendships can evolve in funny ways around funny things that are happening. I think that the urban setting is there because that is my setting, and that I was in Brooklyn and I'm in Prospect Park, and Prospect Park I saw really as a symbol of wilderness and of what can happen in it, and that it is a place, a leftover piece of wilderness where the gods might show up if you're lucky now and then, or they're liable to show up if things are going wrong, which I think they are doing, but not particularly in terms of any one race or culture. I wasn't thinking of it that way.
Excellent. Okay, we have another question from Miss Allison. Go ahead, you want to read that one?
Yeah. I noticed that the book was opened up for another sequel or companion story to Tiltersmith. Do you think another book is in your plans?
I wonder what you think, where you think it opens up. It does. I mean, it leaves some questions answered. And there are some things in there that I think would be a lot of fun to write about. Although my thought is that if I did, it would be at a stage when the protagonists were quite a bit older. And they, as you will see when you're reading it, they're having trouble almost right away remembering what's happened to them, because they've crossed over into that other world. But once you cross back, it's hard to hold on to the stuff that's on the other side of the curtain. So will they remember, and how will it affect them in the future? But that's just a thought in my head. I don't know. It would be fun, but I don't know. It would be a different kind of book. Thanks, Allison.
All right. Excellent questions, everybody. Amy, everything's good? You feel good about this? We got a couple more?
I feel good. I think we've done it. Are we on time?
We've got a few more left. I think we have a little more time for sure.
Okay.
All right. So we've got one from Annette De Palma.
Mm-hmm.
What comes to you more easily, characterization or storyline? Or are they completely interwoven as your work develops?
That's a lovely question. And I think they are interwoven. I think our first will start with some sort of story, event, troubling idea, and the characters may come second. But once you've got both of them in there going together, they're very much causing each other to grow. And the characters will do all kinds of things that you're not expecting from them, which can be fun and can be very annoying sometimes. And but will push you towards moving the story in a different direction, what Oscar was talking about too. So it's organic, I think. You think, Matt?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that question. All right, so there's another one. This from Glenn Last. You want to read that one?
Yeah. Hi, Amy. Did you create the illustration for the cover?
No. And at first I was afraid of the cover because I thought, oh, this book is so so mystical and magical, and look at how active and all that color in there. Isn't that too much for my story? And I came to love that cover. But I was at first a little bit resistant, but I think it is a great cover. And so many people have remarked on it to me, how alive it is. And well, you know, and it gives a sense of who these people are going to be in there and what the feeling of the story is. So there's a lot. Now the back cover is actually very mystical, unfortunately, because there's a lot of text on it. You don't get to see the full illustration. It's got the two panthers on the back, and the panthers play a part in both of the stories. And I guess that would be a spoiler if I say how, but in a very mystical kind of way.
Actually, somebody might have posted a question in the chat that I saw earlier, but maybe it didn't make it to the Q&A. It was something to do with we should all do a book walk or a scab, you know, something where you take us to a bookstore of Prospect Park. I think it'd be great.
Okay, we'll try it. When the weather gets warmer, we'll think about it.
There's 2 questions left in the queue. Do we still have enough time, Kay? How are we doing?
I think we can do it.
Let's
do
do
it. 2 questions. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, so this one's from Emily Filardo. The process of your writing, as you described it, seems to offer some ideas about a very rich way to live, even one who is not writing. Any thoughts? Great question.
Yes. And I mean, I think for me, writing has become so necessary because it's a way for me to live my life in a more focused way, that to remind me of how many things go past us that we don't look into deeply, that we miss. And the writing act draws me again and again back to thinking about what is really going on here on the other side of the curtain, in the world and back of the world, or down inside of atoms, or what is going on out there in the universe. And look at how strange and beautiful the middle of that rose is, and to stop and to look. So the act of writing is constantly honing that practice of being in awe, of thinking about what do we not know yet? How many mysteries are there out there? Which is just a favorite way of walking through life for me. So, great question. That was Emily, right?
That was Emily.
No.
I hope that part is recorded forever in the podcast. Plus, I want to kind of like put it on a wall and just hit play forever. I just love that answer so much. All right, so we've got one more question coming in from Sophia. Have you seen the ghost dog again? I love that this is the last question. Have you seen the ghost dog again since the first time that you described earlier in your talk? What do you think its meaning is?
Well, those are 2 very different questions. Have I seen him again? And what is his meaning? I'm not going to tell you. You read my blog and you'll see what actually happened with the ghost dog. But for me, I began to see him as a guardian of the woods, as a forest deity, as one watching over what was working and what wasn't. And the sadness in his eyes was telling me something about the nature of the danger that we're in. So that's that.
Gosh, I mean, I wish this could keep going. That was just really, really remarkable. Amy, you're such a beautiful soul and a natural storyteller. And Matt, thank you for all your thoughtful questions, and Viola for participating and reading everyone's questions, and for your own. Thank you so much, everyone. What a lively chat and Q&A. I'm sure there are plenty more questions that folks would have loved to have answered, but thank you, all of you, for attending. Thank you, Amy, for your wonderful work. And everyone, please go support Amy and buy her newest book, The Tiltersmith, from Greenlight bookstore. You can buy it online or at either of our stores, one of which is right near Prospect Park.
Good.
Any parting words, Amy and Matt?
Yeah, thank you, Kay, for being our guardian angel back there and watching over my computer, which I was afraid was going to go out on me in any second. Thank you. I felt fairly I was held in safe hands as we were doing this, and I was scared. So great. And thanks again to Greenlight Bookstore, and thanks Matt, and thanks Viola, and guys, thank you for coming. It was really nice to see you, even though I can't see you. I know you're there. Love you, one and all. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Kay.
Okay.